Hello and welcome to the first ever NASCAR Extreme Wreckfest Series Championship event, sponsored by, if we had any sponsors, every car insurance company known to man, because this is about to get very messy. Before we get started, you'd probably like to know a bit about what this series actually is, so let me give you a quick rundown. This series is a championship event with myself against 16 AI components, all from NASCAR, comprised of the 16 entrants from the 2019 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. One of them, however, has been replaced. That's right, he who shall not be named, Lord Voldemort himself, has been replaced by 7-time champion Jimmie Johnson. Each championship season will consist of 10 events, and each event will consist of 10 races at the same racetrack, with variants of that racetrack being used throughout the event if those are available. On screen now are the point values for each finishing position, and each episode will consist of the entirety of one event. So without further ado, let's kick it on down to Killer Keemstar for the command.
Let's get right into the news!
So to make sure all of the NASCAR drivers are perfectly comfortable, we're going to start off this series with an oval race on dirt, kicking it back to NASCAR's roots at the Rockfield Rustflat Raceway. So we're going to start off this first race here in 10th place in the outside line. You're going to notice that actually happens in every race because I'm not entirely sure how to change it. But we're going to get off the line relatively well, move ourselves up towards the top 5, and all of the NASCAR drivers are going to get their first-hand experience of having a jump on the backstretch that Tony Stewart was so desperate for during his career. This backstretch is actually going to be the biggest source of all of our problems in this race, because if you don't land it perfectly, you're going to get real squirrely on exit and probably find yourself on your lid by the time you get to turn 3. Coming around to complete our first lap, you see Kyle Busch go head on into the wall. You're also going to see Clint Boyer pulling a Casper the Friendly Ghost, once again trying to avoid all of the carnage. As we all head off recklessly, I'm going to flip over Martin Truex Jr. just because he got in my way. We're going to continue forward with the rest of the race. Down the front stretch, we're going to see Eric Jones flip over to his side due to no fault of my own. And in the middle of turn 1 and 2, we're actually going to see Martin Truex Jr. doing burnouts for some reason. I have absolutely no idea what's gotten into him. Coming out of turn 4, we're going to run into the Penske boys of Ryan Blaney and Brad Keselowski. And just because we feel like it, we're actually going to take Brad Keselowski out of the race entirely on his lid, and now he's wrecked. That's his career over, most likely. We're actually going to manage to keep it clean for the rest of the race, and we're going to bring it home in 6th place with Denny Hamlin, unsurprisingly, winning the first ever event. He tends to have the tendency of doing that in a lot of big time races in NASCAR. Moving on to race 2, we're coming out of turn 2, and Alex Bowman's actually going to force us to the opposite side of the track before we then come back up into Brad Keselowski, wrecking him once again for the second time in 2 races so far. He's definitely going to be our best ally throughout this entire series, I can assure you of that. The next time around, Kurt Busch is going to decide to take a right turn in the middle of the left-hand corner for some reason and smack straight into the wall before coming back across, hitting us in the right recorder panel and spinning himself out in the process. Running at P5 in the moment with a pretty strong start, stalking Ryan Blaney here before we actually turn our brains off, and we decide to get in a major wreck and end up perpendicular to oncoming traffic on the backstretch. Definitely the best place you could possibly end up. We're going to fall back outside of the top 10 as Eric Jones also shunts us out of the way. We did our best to recover for the rest of the race, but unfortunately we couldn't make up that many positions. We're going to pass Eric Jones and try and get past Kurt Busch out of the line, but it's not going to be enough. Eric Almirola actually won the second race, so he's going to be our second ever winner in the NASCAR Extreme Wreckfest Series Championship. Moving on to race 3, we're actually going to switch our car up a bit because the AI also randomly chooses their car, so I figured why not join them. And heading on from lap 2 into turns 1 and 2, Denny Hamlin's also going to decide to turn off his brain, take a sharp right for some reason, head on into the wall. His race is probably going to be compromised as a result. Man, look at all the orange cones scattered around the track. Somebody needs to at that guy on Twitter and tell him that we found where his entire family has been vacationing for his entire life. Gotta make sure we give Brad Keselowski another love tap at some point in this race. We actually find ourselves on the final lap, battling for the lead with both of the Busch brothers, but unfortunately Kurt Busch is going to try and take us out to protect his brother's victory. So this tire's going to try and follow us along for the ride, but we're going to make it into turn 3 and 4. Kyle Busch is way out front, but when all hope seems to be lost, we're actually going to see that he's going to be wrecked by a lapped car, and we're actually going to come across the line in first place, taking our first ever win in the third ever event of the NASCAR Extreme Wreckfest Series Championship, ending on our side for extra style points. Would you look at that? Moving on to the next race, we're actually going to get a pretty good start until Chase Elliott takes a sharp right and decides that we are not allowed to pass in this corner, and we're actually going to fall all the way back to the tail end of the field before pure chaos begins to overtake the backstretch. And then Chase Elliott, as we enter turn 3, is going to try and kill me and send me way up the track. Unfortunately, I managed to keep my car in orbit and get it back onto the racing groove. A few laps later, as we're just trying to stroll along and survive to the end with our 25 health, you're going to see Brad Keselowski come out of absolutely nowhere trying to kill us, trying to repay the favor from those first few races, but unfortunately he's going to fail miserably. Not much else really happened that race, so we're going to skip ahead to the next one where we're actually going to switch over to the mini European car. This car actually has some pretty insane acceleration, but it handles absolutely terribly. So going into the first corner, we're going to zip past quite a few cars before just running straight into the guardrail because we can't really turn that well. And back into Ryan Blaney, who for some reason has this really absurd spoiler on him. And the only really bad thing I can say about this car is that it's so small that as Eric Almirola gives us a bit of a nudge here, we're then going to pirouette into some kind of barrel roll. And well, just like that, we're not going to talk about how my life just ended before we even completed one lap, and we're just going to move on to the next one. So giving it a go once again, we actually get a much better start this time, keeping it off the wall, although we do rub elbows with Jimmy Johnson for a tiny moment there. We are going to survive into turn 3 this time, and fortunately for us, like Moses, we're going to part the Red Sea and make it right in between that collision, and we're actually going to manage to keep ourselves alive for an entire lap. What a shock. This race wasn't a complete stroll in the park, however, as we're coming around through the backstretch for the final time on lap 5, and somebody's actually parked themselves in the middle of that jump there, and we're going to do once again another pirouette in this little vehicle. Pretty nimble if you ask me. Fortunately, we managed to evade all the oncoming traffic, and well, we're actually going to come home, despite Alex Bowman trying to eat us with that paint scheme of his, in a 13th position. Moving ahead of the next race, we're finally back in a normal sized vehicle, and as we're coming down the backstretch with a lap and a half to go, unfortunately, we've decided to use what we learned in that mini European car, and we're actually going to do another little pirouette, leaving us perpendicular to the oncoming traffic, and unfortunately we're going to pull a Darrell Waltrip at Bristol, and our car is going to be T-boned so hard that we're actually going to end the race right there with a lap and a half left to go. So it's at this point that I figured a few of you would probably be asking me if this championship series would have any kind of playoff format, and to that question I would proudly answer absolutely not. I can't even imagine what kind of idiot it would take to actually think that would ever be a good idea in the first place. Outside of this T-bone with Ryan Newman and then this other T-bone with William Byron, not a whole lot else really happened this race, so we're going to go ahead and skip on to the next one, where I'm actually going to be using the Rammer, which is the fastest car I think I currently have available in Class B, which is what I've been making AI run. So theoretically, this should give me the best overall chance of actually pulling out another few victories at the end of this event. Unfortunately, as we come down the backstretch once again into turn 3, we are again going to practice our gymnastics, pirouetting through the air, but this time we actually come down in a pretty impressive landing on top of the guardrails that would probably impress all of the judges at the Olympics. Unfortunately, however, being on the guardrail is not necessarily the quickest line when you're trying to, beat everybody else in a race. Moving on to the next race, we've actually gotten a pretty good start on our hands. Going into lap 3, we are fighting for second place with Alex Bowman going back and forth for the last few laps. Heading down the backstretch and then into turn 3, we're actually going to see Jimmy Johnson limping on his last breath. And that's no way for a 7-time champion to be living, so we're just going to put him out of his misery so that he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. Unfortunately, just about a lap later, we're going to make the same mistake going down the right-hand side of the backstretch, and as if it was karma, we're actually going to pirouette once again, and as a result, we're going to come to our early demise as someone drives into us head first. Perhaps I should have let Jimmy Johnson live as opposed to ending his life early, because now someone else has done the exact same to me. But after all that, we've managed to somehow make it all the way to the 10th and final race of the event, and before we get a bit too far into the final race, if you have made it this far, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay tuned to the future episodes of this championship series, and if you're interested in seeing how the outcome actually turns out. This race was relatively uneventful, which you would kind of expect, because if you're racing against professional race car drivers, even though they're AI, you would kind of expect them to learn what to do after 10 attempts at the same track. But coming through the last turn, we're actually in a pretty close neck-and-neck battle with both Eric Jones and Kyle Busch, trying to see who can take home the last victory of the event. And unfortunately for us, we're not going to quite be able to get there, and Eric Jones is going to be your 10th and final winner of the very first event in the NASCAR Extreme Wreckfest Series Championship. So after the completion of the first event, let's take a look at the championship standings. And the biggest thing that stands out to me, as you see, is Denny Hamlin, who was the only person that actually achieved more than one win in this first event, is actually 15th in points. And you can look over to the right and see that's actually because he's barely finished inside the top 10 if he hadn't won. And the other thing that I found very interesting was Kevin Harvick, who's actually very far down there. And when I was tallying these points up, I actually realized that in the first 5 races, he never actually finished above 15th position. So he's going to have to dig himself out of that hole if he has any hopes of actually winning this championship here in the first season. And that's basically it for this video, but before I go, I would like to ask anybody that has stuck around this far to leave a like or subscribe if you did enjoy the video. I would really appreciate any and all support I can get. This is an idea I had running around in my mind for the last few weeks, and I just wanted to try and get it out there and see what kind of audience reaction I would get. And if it's something you guys would really like to see more of, then I can try my best to get this out there as quickly as possible. But until then, feel free to leave a comment down below and tell me which driver you're rooting for, or if you're even rooting for me to beat all of them. And if there's any track in particular you would like to see us try and hit up, possibly in the first season. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.